Hello there. Thank you for agreeing to participate in our project once again. The first video, Who Really Rules the World? It caused a huge resonance among our viewers. By the way, who hasn't watched, before watching this video, please, you will now see a link on the screen, watch this show. Otherwise, you just won't understand what we're talking about. So, many of our viewers noted for themselves that they subconsciously felt and understood that many processes in our world have a certain pattern. And we wondered why it happens the way it happens, why we live in such a terrible world. And it seems like everyone wants to live well, but we live as we live. And many, I repeat, felt that there was something behind it, some dark force. And thanks to you, we got the answers. And many have a puzzle. But nevertheless, there are still some questions that people write in the comments in order to fully understand this topic. And with your permission, we will ask these questions to you to remove all these dark spots. Moreover, if we separate these comments, the two categories are just questions on historical events and on issues of rebirth. We will be glad if you clarify them.
Yes, the authors of the project gave me a list of questions from people. I didn't plan to tell you anything more, but I still found some of these questions interesting and worthy of an answer. I foresee that the answers to them will give their result in the not-so-distant future. To begin with, I want to say that I am glad that many have begun to think about whether it's also simple memories of the dead, and whether it's worth doing it at all. Some have reached almost the origins of these traditions, even written about Egyptian magic. But this is not the very beginning of the story. No one has yet got to the bottom of another ancient people, where magic first emerged in the history of our humanity. Look a little higher and to the east on the world map. I won't say any more, you'll figure it out for yourself. I don't have the task to give you historical excursions and explain completely how the world works. I tell only what I think it is necessary to tell, and look for everything else yourself. There is a lot of information.
Okay, well, let's start with the historical part then. The most basic question for our viewers. Why did the Nazis lose if they had such serious occult support?
This is very logical. The Nazis didn't have to win, so they didn't win. They were originally doomed. Make no mistake, those who were behind these events got everything they wanted, and even more. Look, this Nazi elite with their Black Order were just intermediaries. And even the same Hitler was guarded by magicians of the highest initiation real, with great power, for whom millions of ordinary people who fell into their networks worked. And all their magic tricks were paid for by the life force of people. And of course, these magicians have gathered a very large harvest for themselves. Can you imagine in general the number of people who died during the Second World War? And for these comrades, the life force of people is its food. And in fact, to say that the Nazis directly lost would not be entirely correct, because they left freely anyway. They didn't die. Like these magicians, who stood behind them, they also made the transition. The world is much more complicated than it seems, and the hierarchy in the subtle planes is very strong. Well, even if you look at the events of those times from the visible side, it is obvious that no one would have let Hitler and the Nazis take over the world. Those who ask such a question simply do not understand how and why wars are created. People were taught to think in terms of the Greek victory of some and the defeat of others. But this is all, in fact, the same framework of propaganda, beyond which people are not allowed to go out to see the situation holistically. And in fact, this is just a staged performance, where all the scenery is arranged, the roles are distributed, the result is planned and the winnings have long been divided. You know, there is an expression, when a dog throws a stick, it runs after the stick, and when they throw a stick to a lion, he looks at the one who threw it to him. That's what I suggest you do. Finally, look at those who manipulate you and who is behind the creation of such events. Because while your attention is completely absorbed by the thrown stick, this well-defined circle of people behind your back, realize their personal interests. So it happened then. Everyone just solved their own questions. To understand why this war was needed, look at the subsequent result. What did the world map look like before and after? How was the world divided? Who got what? What was the balance of power after the war? It would have been impossible to re-glue the world in a peaceful way, but the war did it. After the Second World War, the world changed irreversibly. Therefore, it is not difficult to calculate the final beneficiaries of this event by simply looking at who received the most benefits in this war. Well, when Hitler played his part, he, like any pawn, was removed from the board. So calm down already with the one who won there, who lost. Not everything is so clear here.
It's clear here. Another question that arose among our viewers after your words is that the war you are talking about is the result of Gurdjieff's activities. Is it so?
No, that's not true. Gurdjieff is not a worldwide evil, there was no way he could have done it alone. Moreover, Gurdjieff is just one of the 6 of those who stand at the top in this hierarchy. At that time, certain processes were running that could not be stopped. So no. It is not only because of the activity of Gurdjieff alone that everything began. The First and Second World Wars were originally planned to be connected, so at that time the outbreak of war was inevitable. But it's a long story, let's not talk about it now.
I think it will come as a surprise to many that he is just a 6, because, in the opinion of many, if he appoints the Pope, then he is a worldwide evil, because, in their opinion, only Satan can appoint the Pope.
Satan himself will appoint the Pope. Don't make me laugh. Again, this is a misunderstanding of the hierarchy of that side. Satan will not deal with such nonsense as the appointment of the Pope. This is the Pope of Rome for us, but in fact he performs only one function. He can't do that anymore. In short, it is not necessary to measure with your own framework what is impossible to measure. By the way, I was pleasantly surprised how many correct comments there are about who the Pope is and what kind of position he is in general. It made me really happy.
The next question is about the living dead. Our viewers are interested in how is it possible for such an evil to exist? Where does God look? And since God controls this world, why does he allow such a rebirth?
And what makes you think that God controls this world at all? In all religions of the world it is very clearly stated in this regard. What is the spiritual world, the world of God, is our earthly, material world. And that this world has its own prince, this is Satan, the devil, he is Iblis or Ahriman. And here he controls everything and his main goal is to devour. So make no mistake. Our world is the devil's world. Well, as for how is it possible for such an evil to exist, so what kind of world did people create? He gave birth to such parasites.
Clearly. Then the next question, again about the living dead. What is the point of them bringing people to death? Who will they eat from then?
And this is directly related to the events that are waiting for us in the near future. With the climate. If the world is doomed, then what remains? I'll explain it metaphorically. Imagine there is a farm where a lot of animals live. And the owner of the farm finds out that a deadly virus has appeared in his village, some new bird flu, very contagious, which mows everyone down. And the owner of the farm understands that within a couple of days all his animals will die from this infection. What will the owner of the farm do in this case? Will you wait for this to happen and just throw tons of meat in the trash? Of course not. He will kill all the animals himself and sell the meat in these couple of days that he stays. So it is with us now. If the world is doomed and the end is inevitable, then at one moment a pile of human meat, life force, will simply be thrown into the trash. Therefore, of course, they tend to take everything for themselves at last. Or another example can be given. Let's say that there is a river that will dry up tomorrow and all the fish in it will die. What should I do in this case? Just wait for it to happen, or catch a fish and sell it? What would you do? That's right, you would have sold and earned. Why do you think they're dumber than you?
By the way, there is another question on this topic from our viewers. If they need our death so badly, why not immediately bang everyone with a sure bomb?
This question is an absolute misunderstanding of what is happening. To feed them, people must throw out strong emotions, live for years in constant emotional tension. And then what happens? Zilch and that's it. No, they need suffering and fear. Glimmers of hope and again suffering and fear, like on a roller coaster to survive the maximum. Therefore, it is much more profitable to scare a nuclear bomb than to really blow it up. Look at how long they have been doing this. How many times have the doomsday clock been translated? As the topic of nuclear war is littered in the news, then they escalate fear to the limit that it is about to start tomorrow, then they say that actually today we were already one step away from the start of a nuclear war, then on the contrary stories begin, then no, this is nonsense, in the 21st century for this to happen. And again in a circle. The main thing is that this topic is always active and it keeps in the information field, which means people think about it very often. And what emotions do the topic of nuclear war evoke? The answer, I think, is obvious. That's why every wild game that wasn't there for this is happening now. It's just that someone is finally trying to harvest as much as possible. Wait, or else there will be. They have not yet got the main trump card, which will squeeze all the juices out of people as much as possible and bring them to stupidity and complete humility. It's hunger. Read a few historical articles on this topic and you will understand that this is the next stage that awaits us. Pandemic, war and famine. These three go hand in hand together. It was said about this in the Torah. And by the way, this scheme has been turned more than once in our history. Well, plus, in this way, people's attention is also diverted from the real threat, which is the climate. After all, if people know the truth, they will stop obeying, and those who now rule the world will lose their power. And they are very afraid of it. This may interfere with their plans for a big transition.
By the way, about the big transition, back in the first video, you also said that the living dead, capable of conscious rebirth and who now rule the world, they are preparing for a big transition. What is this big transition and where are they going to go if our planet dies?
Our world is not the only one. The universe is too big to assume that our planet is the only one inhabited by humanoids. Plus, there are still a lot of parallel worlds. It's you who are sitting here like frogs in a swamp, and you think that this is the whole world. It's not like that. And they have somewhere to go. It's you people who can't get away from here. The most important thing is that everyone feels this impending darkness, but so far many continue to flatter themselves with the hope that everything will get better soon, will return to normal, and it will be as it was. Yes, no. It will not be the same as it was, it will never be, and it will only get worse. But there is still a way out. Although, it is unlikely that people will use it.
Let's move on to the next category of questions. Most of all, our viewers do not understand the topic of reincarnation. What remains after the death of the human body? What part goes to reincarnation? Why did you say that a person turns into a soulless creature? Can you tell us more about this?
Everything is actually simpler than it seems. Such questions arise only because people for the most part do not even know who they are and who they are. For this, you can say thank you to the priests of your religions, who have put a lot of effort into making genuine knowledge lost, or distorted beyond recognition. It's easier to manage the herd and keep it in fear and obedience. Therefore, the question is who is a person? This is a very serious issue. I would even say that it is a matter of life and death. Because if a person doesn't think much about it, then his life is reduced to an Arab existence, which leads to an absolutely predictable outcome at its end. Let's take an example, so it will be clearer. Consider the usual average option. There was a man, an ordinary, good person who lived an ordinary life, was relatively kind, loved his loved ones, moderately quarreled with others, moderately manipulated, as everyone does. But the main thing is that he didn't kill anyone, didn't rob. He was not noticed in particularly grave sins, and maybe even on holidays he visited the temple of his religion. And so, he died. What will happen to such a person after death? How do our people generally think? Again, I am referring here to the thinking of the average person. We do not take into account people who have read esotericism or have heard enough fairy tales from the priests of their religion and think that they know something. So, for some reason, people mostly believe that their relatives will definitely go to heaven after death. Well, because they have suffered and suffered so much during their lifetime, and it seems like they deserve to go to some good place at least after death, or at least finally rest and find peace. But that they definitely won't go to hell. Hell is only for the terrible sinners, for the officials who broke in, for example, or murderers. With regard to such crimes, at first glance, the lifestyle of average people looks almost martyrdom. Many people draw a picture from childhood that deceased relatives continue to observe our life from the sky, and from time to time they come in dreams to warn, suggest something, help or protect from misfortune. I am especially amused by the stories of people about the dead, who appear to them in their dreams in a dazzling white light and tell them how good and joyful they are there. If you only knew some kind of deception, you would be very much, to put it mildly, surprised. But let's take it in order. That is, what kind of logic do people have? As for me, suppose Grandpa Kolya was a relatively good person, then after death he will definitely get to a better world, where everything will be fine for him. And what's really going on? Once upon a time there was, for example, this grandfather Kolya, who did not strain himself much in life with self-control and went on about almost all of his impulses. In this scenario, was our Kolya a good person? And let's face it, what's going on in everyone's mind? Imagine for a moment if our every thought came to life. Could we call ourselves good people after that? And how many times did our grandfather Kolya beat or even kill his tyrannical leader in his thoughts? How many times has he imagined cheating on his wife? How many times in traffic jams at the wheel did he curse the drivers who cut him off? And did grandfather Kolya dream of being the ruler of even his own little number? What did this average person want and strive for in his fantasies? Didn't he hate, envy, and dream of someone else's wealth? What did our seemingly very decent man actually live by, and what scenarios did he scroll through in his head?
Listen, I think now many people have a question: why do you put such an emphasis on what is happening in your thoughts? After all, many people think that the main thing is not to do anything like that in reality, but in your head you can twist anything in your thoughts.
But because in fact there is no difference at all, you thought to do something or have already done it. At the energy level, this is a fait accompli. This is physics, guys, the thought is as real as your action. And if we proceed from the fact that the primary is still the world of information energy, and at first any event takes place at this level, and only then it is realized at the level of our rough material world, then it would even be more correct to say that the invisible side of human life is of paramount importance. That is, what thoughts, desires he lives with and what images he turns in his head. When you dream, you suck your secret thoughts in your head, fantasize. You're creating an image. And this, most likely, you do not even imagine what an image is. The subject of images, of course, is very interesting, and people are not even close to realizing what role they play and what influence they have on their own lives. For clarity, I will give some examples. All magic works through images. The creation of helper demons takes place with the help of images. Thought forms, these are the same images. The mechanism of wish fulfillment is an image that is simply pumped up enough with power to materialize. That is, images are a very effective tool for influencing the surrounding world and a key tool in magic. So the products of our consciousness are very material, and everything that a person represents in the form of images in his head. This is all really happening, just in a more subtle way. Whether this image materializes or not depends on the person, how much he is willing to pay for it. Well, it depends on how profitable it will be for the higher powers to give it to you. And the fact that thought is material has long been experimentally proven by the same Kroholev, for example, who successfully photographed thought images. So far, physics is only getting closer to explaining the nature of images and how people can use them to influence the world around them and each other. But there are already some advances in this direction. So, for example, in experimental conditions, attempts are made to fix the location of images formed by people at a specific point in the room with devices. That is, the experimenters do not know where, in what place of the room the subject will represent the image of a person. But the instruments accurately record it by changes in space. In this place there is a kind of phantom or, in their terminology, a microleptonic clot. Also in our time, there is a theory according to which all images, thoughts and the life path of a person continues to exist next to his physical body in the form of standing lepton waves, or, more simply, in the form of holograms. That is, in simple terms, everything that a person has created in his head, all images are actually created and remain with a person until the end of his life. Well, this is not entirely accurate, maybe an explanation of the process, but plus or minus gives an understanding. And this helps to take a fresh look at the processes of telepathy, telekinetic poltergeist clairvoyance and reincarnation, which we are talking about now.
Listen, but there is some kind of hopelessness. It turns out that we are all sinners and we are going to hell only because of our thoughts or something. And people have both kindness and love. And people are able to show the best human qualities.
This is certainly not something I like to talk about. Well, yes, there is a spiritual component in a person, too. In general, knowledge about the dual nature of man, spiritual and material, exists in all religions of the world. And in occult sources you can also find this division. Even the Masons know about it. By the way, it is a curious fact that Freemasons with the dumbest people on earth consider atheists. Because to deny the existence of the spiritual world. What is this but the biggest stupidity? Not a single atheist became a Freemason during the entire existence of these orders. Any normal practitioner knows about the dual nature of man, because without knowing the basics, no real work will work. And the key point is what? Again, in who a person is. People from pride make the mistake of identifying themselves with the soul and believing that if the soul reincarnates, then the person himself also reincarnates. And since I am a soul, a divine particle, then automatically I am good, and everything will be fine with me after death. This is complete nonsense. Let's pay attention to this. Of course, I don't want to get into philosophy, but well, I'll have to enlighten you a little. So, a person is a complicated being. There is a spirit in him that strives to break free, to reach the heavenly plane. This is actually who a person is. But, also speaking in the language of Orthodox mystics, there is flesh in man, that is, a force that opposes the spirit, which is the source of sin, and only by defeating it can one achieve the liberation of the spirit from the captivity of matter. The action of the flesh manifests itself in a person's life through our own consciousness, through thoughts that come into our head, images, desires. And if we speak in religious language, then this is a personal devil or without, who sits inside every person. And the most fatal moment is that 99.9% of people perceive themselves just as a demon, believing that these are my thoughts, these are my desires, this is how I decided, this is how I think, this is how I perceive the world and so on. It may be hard to realize, but I will say it anyway. You as a person, this is not what your consciousness perceives. You are not consciousness. The whole mess that happens in people's heads with all the pictures and emotions is like ripples on the water created by the devil so that a person could not see his true reflection on the smooth calm surface of the water. Do you remember how it was in the movie Revolver? His biggest trick was that he made you believe that he was you. That's somewhere like that.
Now an idea has come to me. By the way, I have watched this film several times, and I wonder if the director himself understood what meaning he was laying for him or not. Well, yes, most people really associate themselves with the body awareness. What's wrong here?
In my opinion, it's generally stupid to consider yourself a body. It's obvious that it functions absolutely autonomously, without our participation. At the same time, they also manage to control us, indicating when he needs to go to eat, when to sleep and all that stuff. The body. This is what our image, the image of a demon, looks like, but only in this rough material world. Accordingly, the presence of a body contributes to the fact that the spiritual component of a person can stay in this material world and receive his experience of knowing good and evil. In short, a man. This is an immaterial being, he is a spirit. Only here he sits in the same bottle and without. And in fact, our body is the body of a demon, often he controls it, although the human spirit should have been the master, but today he is not. And we move on to the most interesting, what is the soul? They're writing about her now, who knows what. People have mixed everything into the soul, and character, and memory, and emotions, consciousness. I haven't seen a plus or minus adequate description of what it is for a long time.
So what is it?
I'll tell you a secret. The soul is a portal. It is a portal from the world of God to the world of the subtle plane, in which man as a spirit is born. And already thanks to this power, in addition to the spirit, human demons are born. The soul itself is not a fully conscious creation. Its meaning is to connect with the spirit and find your identity. Well, the spirit finds freedom and a new life already in the spiritual world. Another function of this portal of the soul is that energy comes through it from the other side, which gives this life that we feel. An interesting fact, in fact, we do not live only at the expense of energy that comes to us from food. Have you ever wondered what energies we live on? What kind of gasoline? And who's pouring it? It is the energy of food that is important for the body, and then it only partially makes up for the costs. And on the mental, on the subtle plane, the energy that comes from the portal is already important there. And if there is no light coming from the soul, then neither the spirit or the demon will live. Hence, in fact, the struggle of demons for this light. And a bunch of different leeches stick to a person to feed on the remnants of this light. In a person, there are still a lot of demons from the mental plane, that is, a person is multiple, his field of consciousness can be many demons. So, if a person did not enter this portal until the moment of death and did not even walk towards it during his lifetime, then how can he be in the world where this portal leads? That is, to believe that any person after death will just get into the world of God just because he was relatively good, but who did not take any steps towards spiritual development. It's the same as thinking that you can get to Japan without leaving your room. But here the whole trick is that even being in your room, you have a plane ticket in your hands. Just to get to your destination, you need to make some effort, go all the way to the airport and eventually get on a plane. And so, returning to our grandfather Kolya. If he didn't go anywhere during his lifetime and spent his life like a little imp, then what will he be left with after death? What will he become after death? But there are a lot of people like our grandfather Kolya, who seems not to be ours, not yours. For example, are you sure that paradise awaits you after death? Think about it, isn't it logical? Where did the barn suddenly come from after death, if you didn't even come close to it in any way during your lifetime? After all, your life, your point of perception into your inner state. This is your world. In fact, each person lives in a purely personal world, forms his own reality. And what you create in this reality will become your future after death. There will not be just a dream or, as some believe, after death there will just be a black screen, nothingness, and that's it. Do you still need to earn such a state? No, after death, if a person has not entered the portal of the soul, he remains here, in the form of an information and energy clot, and the body simply turns into dust, decomposes. Haven't you seen what bodies turn into? Everything is like any other animal, but what does the mental plan have to do with it? At this level, everything is different for a person. I don't understand why many people tie everything to the brain. Until today, they have not found in the brain where a person is, and consciousness has not been found there, where she is hiding. The spirit was not found there either, nothing was found. Therefore, a person does not die together with the brain bodies, he simply passes into another state. Well, the soul goes to reincarnation, and with it, I'll put it this way, everything good is disconnected. Because just the same, the source of all the best human qualities is the soul. I repeat once again, the soul reincarnates, but not the person. Therefore, it is wrong to assume that the previous incarnation of the soul, that's you too. No, they were the same people as you, but they have nothing to do with you. Each person has only one life.
So what then remains of a person after death?
After death, if a person has not entered the portal, then the only one with whom he remains is with a demon. And he himself also becomes a demon. Imagine what it's like, a spirit enslaved by a demon. Not only did you run around with him during his lifetime, but even after death you get into total slavery to him. Still, if I were people, I would take my life more seriously, as if your life depended on it. Sorry for the tautology.
You said that if a person has not entered the portal of the soul, then he remains here in the form of an energy informational clot. What is this clot? Can you explain?
Yes, actually, this is the concentration of all that you have collected in your life. Imagine all the events of life, every moment of it, all desires and aspirations from birth to death, all this in precise detail and in the entirety of the emotional spectrum is focused at one point. All this immediately and simultaneously falls on the one who used to be a person. And now imagine those who consider themselves good people. If you collect all your emotions into one point, or even one emotion, for example, only all the moments of ordinary everyday mild irritation, but for all the years of your life, imagine what this state will eventually be. I think now the answer to the question is obvious: why does a person turn into a creature after death?
Listen, well, where is this clot? If the dead man has not gone to the world of God, yes, then where does he go? Where is this clot located?
It's simple. Anyone who has not entered the portal remains near it. I will explain figuratively. Imagine the portal as it is drawn in fiction. Such, bordered by stones. So, these clumps become stones on this portal. Each new dead person simply fits into the masonry around the soul. And in the world of the subtle plane, he remains there and accompanies the soul in subsequent reincarnations. But already in the new body, where this soul enters, a new blank sheet of paper is born, which in the future will also become another stone on this portal, on this gate. And so on in a circle, until someone still enters the portal. People walk around with portals inside, not realizing that there are hundreds or even thousands of stones around it. And these are the same people in the past as they are. But due to the fact that these stones are former people, are near the source of forces, near the portal, they continue to exist. This happens until the portal is completely closed with stones, and a person, as a spirit, can no longer pass through it. Then the light from the world of God does not pass here, the portal disappears completely and everything is destroyed. But these are thousands of stones, so that you understand, it's not all that simple. So there are only two options: a person either leaves the subtle plane into the world of God, or becomes a material immobilized demon, a stone in the devil's wall.
I am 100% sure that people will argue with your concept and reincarnation. For example, even in Buddhism, this process is described in a completely different way.
Guys, Buddhists are those who followed the Buddha, a dozen or two more went into the portal after him. And the rest are not like a stone, they have become cobblestones on the road, they are running around with their "oh, mom," but they do not understand what all their practices are aimed at. What do Buddhists work with? Consciousness. What do they work for? For them, the main thing is to merge with the demon, to become part of the wall, so that the truth is revealed to the mind. Of course it will open when you become a stone. Many things are revealed to the dead. But this is the truth of being, not the truth of God's world. Do you feel the difference? They do not seek to enter the portal, they want to see the whole wall, expand their knowledge. To achieve nirvana in the understanding of Buddhism is to work for a demon, go to the owner and become a demon yourself. So you won't talk about reincarnation there.
Clearly. The next question is from our viewers. Why do the dead need energy? Why do they need the attention of the living?
Very simple. Every time we remember a dead person, we share our life force with him. We spend time, attention, and emotions on this while still doing it. Consequently, part of our life force is redirected to the dead. For him, it's such a gift, it's like a small temporary painkiller for someone suffering unbearable torments. Do you imagine the condition of a dead person at all? All the accumulated emotions for life smear you with a huge load just under the most powerful pressure. There is nowhere to go, hide or switch to something else. Because there is nothing else. Just you and your accumulated negativity over a lifetime. Every moment of your life, every act of yours and its consequences are replayed 100 times and so on for eternity. And there is no one to call for help. No one will come, no one will help. Plus, being near the soul adds, well, let's say, its own atmosphere. It's like a constant reminder of a missed opportunity and the impossibility of getting everything back. This is complete loneliness and total hopelessness. And a drop of vitality from a living person gives, albeit temporary, but relief. Imagine, for a dead person to reach life, what does it feel like? Of course they will hunt for every drop of attention of the living. Hence the expression that the dead are eternally hungry. They are starving for vitality, because they no longer have their own and will never be again. Of course, they will try to break through to the living, they will dream and come, and they will do everything possible to squeeze out as much power as possible from the living. Hence, by the way, the desire of people to earn fame during their lifetime. Or if you fail to secure an eternal memory for yourself, then at least it will be remembered as much as possible for your relatives. For example, leave them a good inheritance, which will remind the whole family of the deceased benefactor for a very long time. It is rather a subconscious desire to be in a more privileged position after death. Therefore, many dictators sought to perpetuate themselves in monuments and leave their mark on history at any cost. And since people remember the negative better, then, accordingly, our history is the same as it is.
Alright, here is another misunderstanding people have. What is the difference between the reincarnation of the living dead and an ordinary person? That is, if all people reincarnate, it turns out that everyone is alive. The dead. And if I don't remember my past life, then it's good, and if I do, then it means a living dead person. Is it so?
No, of course it's not the same thing. The one I call the living dead is a person who, even during his lifetime, purposefully engaged in the practices of conscious rebirth in order to seize power in an already new body after the death of his body. That is, the soul went to reincarnation, a new person was born with his body and spirit. But a dead person enters his energy body, who completely displaces this new person by himself and lives instead of him. He gets access to a gas tank with life force, and, accordingly, a new physical body. Of course, this whole story of conscious rebirth is not endless, although it is probably the closest version of immortality in the body that exists today. But there is a limit to this. As I have already said, there will still come a moment when the portal will be completely closed with stones and everything will end. But such practices will not fall into your hands so easily, you cannot even dream. They are not given to everyone in a row. This is, let's say, an option for the elite, a VIP service. Well, I have already described your usual reincarnation, so don't worry, you're not dead if you ask such a question. You would have known about it. A dead person knows for sure that he is dead. But, by the way, there is another option when the dead and without knowledge of special practices can seize power in the body of a living person after death and prolong their existence.
I wonder how it is.
Well, for example, if a person was energetically pumped enough during his lifetime, let's say he was engaged in magic, was a priest of some religion, or the person was famous, attracted a lot of attention from others, then even after death he remains a strong enough demon in this laying of stones near the portal. Such a demon will dominate over other stones, and if he manages to reach the power of the living, then he can take the reins and dominate the spirit. But when the spirit is enclosed in a stone, the former dead man can live instead of him. Moreover, such activation of a dead person inside the energy body of a living person can happen at any moment of his life, at any age. Everything can start with unusual dreams, when you dream of places you haven't been to before, people you've never known. And the most important thing is that in a dream you are another person. You may even dream of something of a different gender. Then, over time, a voice appears in my head, which begins to give useful advice that really works, predict events or warn if danger threatens. Well, in fact, the manifestations can be different. The point here is that a dead person must first attach himself to a living person, attract attention to himself, shake and gain enough strength to be able to gradually, step by step, strengthen his manifestation. And there is no doubt that such things in a person's life attract his attention and cause a lot of emotions, which is a direct drain of vital forces to the dead. And there may be two options here. The first is when the dead completely replaces the person, when you suddenly wake up in some place and don't remember how you got here, and it's been 3 days since you last remembered yourself. And all this time your body was just walking with another driver in the cab, communicating with other people, and so on. That is, a dead man lived instead of you. And the second option is when a person does not even notice that a substitution is taking place in him. This happens so imperceptibly for the person himself that he simply considers the manifestation of the dead man to be part of his character. If you dig into the history, you will find a lot of confirmation of my words. You will suddenly discover for yourself that the living dead and the dominant dead are written in direct text in many sources. For example, a completely different meaning will find for you the daimon of Socrates, who, as he himself said, accompanied him from early childhood in the form of a certain voice that always suggested what not to do, but was silent when Socrates acted correctly. Only for some reason this kind genius framed him at the most crucial moment, when he suddenly fell silent during the trial, according to which Socrates was sentenced to death. And all the time while Socrates was voicing his defense speech, he was sure that he was doing everything right. And in fact, the dead man kept him for the time being, as animals are kept on a farm, and then simply devoured him. And there are many such examples. Edgar Cayce, Maxim Gorky, and so on. But this is a completely different story, as one presenter said. I'm leading to the fact that people don't even imagine how many really dominant dead people there are in our world. And what a drain of the energy of the living into the world of the dead goes every day.
Okay, thanks, and you also said that they talked about the dead who come in dreams, in the glow and tell how good they are there. What's wrong with them?
I'll tell you, but you won't like it. The dead lie to you. It's kind of like an unspoken conspiracy, a conspiracy of the dead. None of them will ever tell the truth. Because if people know the truth, the dead will lose their nourishment very quickly. And this means hellish, unbearable torments, even without a single moment of respite, which could grant drops of living power from living people. And so not for long and lose all your power. For every drop of your life, these creatures are ready for anything. Therefore, they are trying in every possible way to impersonate those of your former good, loving relatives. They draw a picture that they are now almost angels in heaven. But in fact, an unscrupulous hungry creature is hiding behind this image, which has come to bite off a piece of your life. Well, I've given you a new conspiracy theory.
Well, but they will definitely object to you, because there are a lot of stories that come in dreams, warn, give good advice, protect and help avoid some unpleasant situation. What do you say to that?
You asked that very correctly. Good question. Of course, the dead come and prompt and help, and even your life will be saved, only you continue to feed them. If you die, it will also share power with them. I'll step back a little. I remembered the comment under our first video, which describes the story of my grandfather, a combatant. And so he told me that the whole war he was saved by a voice that sounded in his head. For example, when he was running to attack, his voice suddenly prompted him to go to the left. He turns off and immediately cuts off all those who ran with him, machine gun fire. Or when he was sitting in a trench, a voice suddenly ordered him to get out of there urgently, and as soon as he came out, a shell flew into that place. Here's a good example of how a dead person saves his carrier. And about dreams, then you just remember for yourself, what is the first reaction to the fact that a dead person dreamed? Especially if he predicted something and it came true. The first is, of course, pride comes out. How extraordinary I am, this has happened to me. How much attention is then given to this topic? How many times do people retell such a dream to all their friends and strangers? They are terribly proud of it. Often, such dreams are remembered until the end of life. And every time, with every memory of a dream, what happens? That's right, you remember this dead man and give him a part of your life. And even if nothing supernatural happened in the dream, then a lot of thoughts still come on the topic of what would it mean. And why did I dream, for example, of a dead grandmother? What did she want to say? And a bunch of theories begin. Or maybe it's a sign. Maybe I have to go to work today. And so on and so forth. Again, the story begins to tell everyone. And immediately there are advisors that it is necessary to go to remember the dead and go to visit the cemetery. And this is all the time. Attention. And the dead man eats and eats and eats. By the way, what they say that the dead feed on our prayers is true. Only in this truth they forget to say that they eat at your expense, they eat you, and they take away part of your life. Therefore, when your deceased mother comes to you in a dream, you need to understand that this is no longer the loving and caring mother that you knew during your lifetime. This, no matter how blasphemous it may sound, a creature has come, ready to get the life force out of you by any means. And it's not some kind of entities that come under the guise of a dead relative. No, it's just that these people became like that after death. The dead, like any demon, becomes an insatiable creature. You can call me the last words and hate me as much as you like, and prove with foam at the mouth that this is not so. I don't care, it won't change the essence of things.
Listen, here are some of our viewers, either from misunderstanding, or in a fit of altruism, wrote the following comments. I'm even going to read one of them now. So what if my dead mother takes over a part of my life? Slower is not a pity. Why not share? Especially if it will ease her suffering there. What can you say to that?
I can say that those who think this way need to understand one thing for themselves once and for all. If your relative has not gone to the portal, know that no matter how good he is here, there, after death, he eventually becomes a creature and begins to spoil the life of the living. And this does not mean that some ghosts will start coming to you. No, it's just that suddenly a living relative has illnesses, failures, poor health, depression, life turns into hell. In the past, a cheerful person becomes apathetic, irritable, or even becomes an alcoholic, for example. Not a single person has stopped drinking if a dead person comes to him, and those who have never drunk, begin to do it. Because the dead are pulling out their life and stealing their light. That is, the light that comes from the portal and gives life, it is intercepted by these stones. All these are fairy tales that a man died, went to heaven and Peter meets him there. This is where we meet each other, and there is a world of different physics, different from ours. On the subtle plane, everything is completely different from itself, and the higher the plan, the more changes. A person in the world of energy does not look like what you used to think. There is a person or a geometric figure, or a spot, it all depends on the person. Is that how the same magic works? If the specialist is really good, a magician, strong, he creates phantoms and puts them to this geometric figure. And already receives food from it. You know, it's like, as if, for example, we took and connected our shed to a neighbor's meter and use his electricity, and he doesn't even know about it. So here, Mac or Dead is connected, from someone else's meter it shakes electricity for itself. What is fraught with such a connection for a person? It is fraught with shortening the years of life, it is fraught with a decrease in the quality of life. What happens to a person when the energy level drops sharply? How do you feel when you have lost a lot of strength? And if such a drain happens all the time? Hence depression and unwillingness to live. Also, some mental illnesses can develop, well, everything else. And the most dangerous thing, if a dead person is connected to your electricity source, is that the dead person can simply drag you away with him. Moreover, this can happen in any form, a serious illness may suddenly appear, an accident may happen. Or a person will unexpectedly go out the window for himself. And such a person, both here and in the next world, will be the slave of a dead man. To be honest, the logic of people who write such comments is very strange. It turns out that since my mother died, then let me die, so what is it? But if people want to die as soon as possible, then I don't mind, let them do what they want with their lives. Only then let them take into account one more fact. In that world, in the world of the dead, there is its own hierarchy, and the person who dominated others during life will dominate them after death. And if your mother was quite authoritarian during her lifetime, then after death there is a high probability that both the children and the husband will fall into slavery to her. After all, a stronger dead man enslaves a weak one. Therefore, these stories of people, how the deceased wife came to pick up her husband, are not just stories. She came for her future slave, and if she dominated him during his lifetime, then after death he will be in her power for many, many hundreds of years. Or, when you dream of a dead mother and says that everything is fine, I took my father, now he is with me, so you know, your father is enslaved in the afterlife.
This is very serious information. I am sure that many people will need time to comprehend and realize it.
Well, then, while you're thinking, I'll tell you another interesting thing. Why shamans, when they summon the spirit of a deceased ancestor, it comes to him in the form of an image, for example, in the form of a wolf or an owl. Has anyone thought about it? And I'm going to tell you a terrible secret. In fact, this is a really terrible secret. Let's say a shaman needs to turn to his ancestors, consult on some issue, or gain wisdom from them. But the dead really have great knowledge about our world and an understanding of all the interrelationships, because they are already part of the devil's dead wall. Well, in order for a shaman to summon a deceased relative and consult with him, he must first create a phantom, for example, a wolf phantom, and only then summons an ancestor spirit. Why is he doing this? Because a real shaman knows perfectly well that a dead ancestor is a demon. And that he's part of the devil. Therefore, he calls him into this phantom, encloses the spirit of the ancestors of the inner and talks to the phantom already. And the demon turns out to be in prison, like a bird in a cage. You miss it when you wanted to admire it yourself, not when the bird wanted to eat. Because this bird wants to eat all the time. But you open the window and pour the grains only when you want to admire. And then she flies into this cage. But don't shit and don't litter in your house. So does the shaman, encloses the spirit of the ancestors of the phantom, but does not let him directly to himself, because if he lets him in, then the dead will devour him. Therefore, until the shaman creates a cage, he will not call anyone. There's another interesting question here. What is the grain for this bird? What is the food and bait for the ancestor spirit? I think you are already beginning to understand. The shaman takes part of the life from the customer of the ritual. When you come to the shaman with some kind of request, for example, you want to be successful, and the shaman conducts a ritual for you, then you will pay for it not only with dollars, but also with your life. Moreover, the shaman takes part for himself, and part goes to create a phantom into which a dead man will enter and devour there. Because your life is food for him. And now you are already living your life not as joyfully as you would like, because most of the energy that comes from the portal is taken away from you. Well, if a bird flies into an open window without an invitation and without a cage, then it will not only shit everything around, but also create a lot of problems. Therefore, to prevent this from happening, the shaman restricts the territory to the phantom and does not feed the spirits of the ancestors on his own, because if he feeds his own, he will very quickly become exhausted and die. Therefore, shamans do everything at the expense of the energy of the people who come to them, for your energy. And do not believe that there are white shamans who are supposedly for good, and who perform rituals for free, because they are supposedly good. Those who take money are 1,000 times more honest than white shamans, because money is the equivalent of your life. You have spent your time and effort to earn them. Therefore, when you pay with money, you are already partially paying the dead only with your past. Well, partly the shaman takes part of the life of your future, and those who do not take money, they take 100% in your future, your happiness. This is magic, nothing happens here for free. And of course, there are a lot of scammers among shamans and magicians who use the placebo effect. Often, behind such sorcerers is a bird that flew into them as into a cage, lives instead of them and twists them as he wants. They seem to earn money, and even sometimes something turns out, but only with clients in the end, trouble happens and they have a hell of a lot in their lives. So that you understand, out of 1,000 shamans and magicians, there can be only one who knows what to do. The rest are either the victims themselves, or scammers, and if you fell for a scammer, then you are still very lucky, in which case you will only lose money. Part of his past. Yes, you lived in vain, worked in vain, lost money, but it will be worse if you lose your future.
What you said about the phantoms is very interesting. As far as I remember, none of the shamans we interviewed before you talked about this?
Of course, no shaman will tell and teach everyone how to work with these spirits, and in fact, with demons. And how to create phantoms. What I have told you, these are the cells, these are the hidden animals, and by the way, they can be inherited, that is, the shaman can transfer the cell he has already created, the accumulated phantom to his disciple. Since you give your child the cage where the bird arrives. In fact, it is a controlled demon.
Tell me, can a phantom have any image?
Yes, you can create any kind of phantom. It's just a form. Why do shamans use images of animals? But it went back to the days when there was no fiction and a special variety of images around, but there were animals. In general, you can create even a dragon, even a striped beaver, it doesn't matter. And many shamans created their own phantom to go into it after death, and already in the form of a phantom they came to their disciple. And it is also important to say that they created not just disciples, they created slaves who would feed them, they created their future, because they knew how demons suffer after death. And if a person has already become a shaman, then he already understands perfectly well that he will not enter the portal, because he will burn him. It's like a person going into a blast furnace, into a red-hot furnace. Try to come in, what will happen to your body? It is clear that we are on fire. So the shaman cannot enter the portal, he will only be a stone around him. I understand this perfectly well, he creates a phantom, which he will then go into and in which he can then travel in Australia simply and safely. Okay, since I'm talking about it, I'll tell you another secret that few people know about. We have heard everything that shamans can see far away, what is happening at a great distance, or make an exit to the astral, as it is now called. So, if a person is not prepared and tries to go out somewhere, it is not a fact that he will return alone or that he will return to his empty apartment. Do you know how it is in Spain? Went out for a while, came back, and you already have a gang of gypsies living in your apartment? Or while you went out for a walk, you came back, plastered with leeches that will eat you. So, to prevent this from happening, the shaman closes his body so that no one can get in there, and protect it himself, he leaves it and travels already in a phantom. It's like a bird in a cage, it can stand among cats. Yes, it's scary, unpleasant, but the cat will not go there and will not be able to cause any harm. In general, astral travel is very serious. Now this topic is used and promoted by those who know it all. And who is looking for himself or a slave, who will feed him, or a new home. And this is often done by the future dead, who thus want to provide for themselves after death. Therefore, it is necessary to understand what it is and think before experimenting with what is called an exit to the astral.
Thank you so much for sharing such valuable information. And we hope that we have answered all the questions of our viewers and were able to explain what happens to a person after death and why it is not worth feeding the dead.
In fact, if anyone pays attention, he will find and see confirmation of my words. It's all easy to check. You can double-check every word I say. Well, those who know this do not need it, they already understand everything. But you can also double-check worldly life by the events that occur. And if you are observant enough and bring everything together, then you will see everything for yourself. It's just that people look through their fingers and do not notice the connection in the events of their own lives. But pay attention, if your close relative or dear person becomes a stone on the portal, you will see how your life will slowly change. And there is a normal human life, it will turn into a preoccupied and with a lot of problems. There will be no more of the life that was before, when you were pure and free. And if there are 2 or 3 such stones, then there is already a serious problem looming. Notice how often it happens, one in the family dies, and after a while someone else, and sometimes the whole mouth. Just a series of deaths attacking. And no matter what religion the priest will perform funeral rituals, it will not work. Priests are mostly banal liars. Their magic is powerless. To tell that demons cannot enter the temple, but the demons are there and read you fairy tales, have you thought about it? They also perform magical rituals that have not worked for a long time, because they have lost the essence of these rituals. And they come to work in religion only for the sake of money, well, and to amuse themselves with power. And look at how many stones and leeches are hanging on each of them. Many of the things I'm saying now will start to pull, infuriate. But isn't that right? And if they were really saints, going to God, would they fight like that for property? Look at what they have at the forefront. The same thing is happening in completely different countries of the world. Is any of them fighting for the salvation of your soul, for spiritual freedom? Do they fight for the parishioners to get to heaven? No. They fight for temples to take them away from competitors, and the flock is used as fools, as a battering ram to drive out the same competitors and go in themselves. Who besides demons does this? Yes, initially, spiritual knowledge, as a tool that allowed humanity to enter the portal, was brought by Jesus and the last prophet in purity. But their bodies did not have time to cool down, as this knowledge was immediately turned into magic. It's just that someone wanted power and money. If followers come with a desire to have the same glory as the prophets, but not to be the same as them, then immediately leeches and demons cling to them, and immediately everything that was given is distorted by demons. That's why the result is like this. Wake up, people. I'll give you a simple example. Religions have existed for thousands of years, and to this day people kill each other for property. Both religions and priests do the same. They steal, take away, steal. At home, Geth is 1,000 times more honest than religion, at least it is not covered by God. And most of the real magicians tell the truth. Of course, they don't tell you that you will pay for their services with your life, but who warns a chicken before eating it? And the priests who killed that knowledge distorted the roads that the prophets showed. They themselves already know nothing and are hiding behind God. And they don't know how to do anything, they haven't saved anyone yet and they don't enter the portal themselves. And in the whole history of millions of priests, maybe a dozen have entered the portal, and then it's those who were still next to the prophets, the first. And the rest were just stones laid on someone's souls. And what, didn't you know that? What kind of religion can we talk about, what kind of knowledge that was brought? Those who came said, here is the portal and the road, be a man and come in. And these have shoved their rituals, magic, worship, enveloped knowledge in such a fog that the road is not visible. People are wandering in 3 pines, and these priests just come to mess people's heads, earn money and live better than they do. It's better this way than to lay sleepers or build houses, for example. Let them, mere mortals, work, and now these lords will sit on the neck of the people and do nothing. After all, this is how it turns out now. The topic of magic in religion is very serious and big. Therefore, I will not continue any more. In general, it is a very interesting question how one person affects another, but that's enough for today.
Everything you have told is very interesting, and we hope that we will have the opportunity to organize another meeting. Moreover, I think that after this interview, our viewers will have a lot of questions.
If there is a reason for it, I took it out.
Thank you.